Hello, this is your humble host and narrator, JT Wheatley, and welcome back to another episode of the History of Comic Books podcast, the 2000s to modern day. This is where things get a bit tricky, as it's true what they say, history only happens in the past, as you never know when something is important until years later. Thus, the closer we get to present, the less we're able to distinguish between what is historical and what is not. Nevertheless, here we go. The 2000s opened with some good news when Marvel emerged from bankruptcy and enjoying the success of the X-Men movie released on July 14, 2000. With Joe Quesada as the new editor-in-chief, Marvel left the CCA for their own in-house code. With that, they launched the Max line, which allowed them for more curated content, most notably Alias, on November 2001 by Brian Michael Bendis and Michael Gaydos, which introduced the character Jessica Jones. Also, in October of 2000, the Ultimate line was launched with Ultimate Spider-Man by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley, designed to update the classic Marvel heroes for modern times in a separate universe. The line would continue to 2013 when it was folded and its remaining characters, notably Miles Morales, the new Spider-Man, into the Marvel regular line. Outside of comic books, The Adventures of Kavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon on September 19, 2000 was released, a fictional tribute to the golden age of comic books that was so good he was hired to work on the Spider-Man 2 movie, but more on that later. With DC, the cartoon series Static Shock premiered on September 25, 2000 on the WB, with the Justice League following on November 17, 2001 on Cartoon Network. All part of the same animated universe started by Batman animated series back in the early 2000s, it converged into Justice League Unlimited on July 31, 2004 on the Cartoon Network, which featured nearly every DC character from all the previous series, becoming a dream for DC comic book fans everywhere. Also of note was the premiere of Smallville on the WB, the channel that would become the CW, on October 1, 2001, which depicted a young Clark Kent growing up in his own hometown. On the comics front, the Hush storyline launched in Batman number 608 on December 2002 by Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee, introducing the new villain Hush. At Image, The Walking Dead launched on October 2003 by Robert Kirkman and Tony Moore, which dealt with a world suffering a zombie apocalypse, quickly becoming one of the most successful Image comics in years. It later inspired The Walking Dead TV show on AMC, which premiered on October 31, 2010. Perhaps the biggest news with comics came into movies and TV, with Spider-Man opening on May 3, 2002, at a record-breaking $100 million for the opening weekend, quickly becoming one of the most successful comic movies of all time. It was followed up the next year by X-Men United on May 2, 2003, and Spider-Man 2 on June 30, 2004. Suddenly, Marvel and comic movies were big business, and DC wasn't far behind with the review of The Batman Begins on June 15, 2005 by Christopher Nolan, and its sequel, The Dark Knight, on July 18, 2008, considered one of the best comic book adaptations ever. With Heath Ledger, who sadly passed away after filming was completed, receiving a posthumous Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his brilliant portrayal of the Joker. WBDC did try to reboot Superman as well with Superman Returns on June 28, 2006, but with middling results. Other comic books outside of Marvel and DC got their shot as well, with Hellboy premiering on April 2, 2004, followed by its sequel, Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, on July 11, 2008. Frank Miller's comics saw some success as well in the movie scene, with Sin City premiering on April 1, 2005, which was he co-directed with Robert Rodriguez, and then 300 on March 9, 2007, directed by Zack Snyder. Meanwhile, Marvel got into the filmmaking business full-time with the formation of Marvel Studios in 2004, with the intention of financing and producing their own movies of their characters. The first films with the new studio was Iron Man on May 2, 2008, and The Incredible Hulk on June 13, 2008, which opened not only to critical and commercial success, but laid the groundwork for the shared universe in all the films taking place in the same world, just like in the comic books. Continuing with Thor, Captain America, and the Avengers, it has since become the most successful film series in movie history. All this took place as Disney acquired Marvel in 2009. Not all the news was good, however, as Acclaim Entertainment went defunct in 2004, taking Valiant Comics with it. Thankfully, the company quietly returned the rights of Solar, Magnus, and Turok back to Gold Key. In 2005, Dinesh Somanzi, excuse that pronunciation, and Jason Kothari purchased the rights and rehired Jim Shooter to help reboot the line in 2007. By May 2012, Valiant returned with brand new comics, absent of Gold Key characters, whose company was acquired by DreamWorks in 2012. Back on the comics front, digital started to gain ground, and Marvel launched Digital Unlimited in 2007, which allows subscribers digital access to all of Marvel Comics for a monthly fee, similar to Netflix with movies and TV. Filmmakers also bled over into the comic books, with J. Michael Straczynski taking over Amazing Spider-Man on March 30th, 2001, Joss Whedon getting his own run on X-Men with the Astonishing X-Men in 2004, Reginald Hudlin relaunching Black Panther in 2005, and Richard Donner, the director of Superman the movie, doing a run on the comic in 2006. Of course, crossover events were still happening in comics, most notably Infinite Crisis by DC in 2005, which attempted once again to reboot the DC line, followed up by the weekly comic book 52, which covered a week and issue in 1 year of the DC Universe, ending up being one of the biggest successive comic books in recent years. Over at Marvel, Civil War was published in 2006, pitting the superheroes against each other as the government decides to finally regulate them. Meanwhile, Disney was enjoying the success of buying Marvel when The Avengers premiered on May 4, 2012, quickly becoming the most successful film in the company's history. In 2013, they bought Lucasfilm, which included, at the time, the rights to Star Wars, which resulted in Dark Horse losing the license, who naturally reverted back to Marvel in 2015. October 10th, 2012, the CW launched Arrow, a new live-action series based on the Green Arrow character. So successful, it spun off The Flash in 2014, Legends of Tomorrow in 2016, and eventually brought in Supergirl from CBS after its first season in 2015. Black Lightning has become the most recent addition to the CW universe. Back at comics, DC tried to reboot their line again. This is becoming a drinking game. With the new 52 on June 1st, 2011, which relaunched every series from number 1. It ended in May 2015 with the old continuity returning again. On the film front, WBDC tried to emulate MCU's success by first launching Man of Steel on June 10, 2013, meant to launch a DC cinematic universe like the MCU, followed by Batman vs. Superman on March 25, 2016, and then Suicide Squad that same year, and Wonder Woman on June 2, 2017. While mostly successful financially, they were reviled by critics, with the exception of Wonder Woman, which is quite good, and divided fans over their lack of continuity with the comics. It appears to have ended with Justice League on November 17, 2017, which is both a critical and financial failure that was nothing like what the Avengers were. As of today, the DCEU plans are up in the air, with WB considering ending the shared universe altogether. That wasn't the case with Marvel, who on February 16, 2018 launched the Black Panther, and has since become one of the most successful comic book movies of all time. Meanwhile, Marvel also teamed with the streaming service Netflix in launching a series based on their own street-level superheroes, with Daredevil premiering in 2015, followed by Jessica Jones, Luke Cage in 2016, Iron Fist in 2017, and finally having them all team up in the Defenders on August of 2017. While Disney has since announced plans to launch their own streaming service, by all reports, these series will continue on Netflix. And that brings us to present day. Like I said, it's a bit tricky just what to touch on, and most of it seems to have been taking place outside of comics. Well, if you're still with me, thank you for following this brief but winding road to the history of comic books. Now, as promised, we're going to double back with future episodes, beginning with the character that launched the Golden Age as we get to the origin of Superman. And now it is June 14th, 2018, and here is my favorite comic book of the week. Mr. Miracle, number 9, by Tom King and Mitch Gerads, which finds Mr. Miracle / Scott Free negotiating to end the war between New Genesis and Apocalypse with his brother Calabac. Meanwhile, him and his wife Big Barda go on a tour of Apocalypse and their old stomping grounds when they were kids. Once again, King balances the fantastic with the mundane, as negotiation tactics look very much like, modern-day negotiation tactics between nations. While him and Big Barda is reminiscent about childhood, whether it be sneaking wine, granted it's called bone wine, or bathing in a fire pool, it has a nice personal touch to it. Ms. Gerads' art remains fantastic and brilliant, continuing the 9-panel-a-page structure, delivering some dense storytelling that remains the best mix between Jack Kirby's classic artwork and modern day. And simply put, all that plus a cliffhanger that leave you like you just been punched in the gut, and this is the best comic book on the stands right now. Seriously, if you're not reading Mr. Miracle, you are missing out. And now that I've finished my brief and rambling history of comics in general, I just want to first off thank all my listeners for listening to me. It's been great. I've been doing this for fun, and I'm having a ball doing it. I'm going to keep doing it as long as I have fun. And all the listeners out there from Australia, my dad's home country, to Ireland, thanks for listening. And, of course, in America, which has been very dense, including places like Texas, Massachusetts, where my dad is now, by the way. He likes to bounce around. South Carolina, and of course in Canada too. Thanks for listening. I don't know why I just did this for my own thing, but if you're listening and enjoying it, thank you very much. And yes, you can find me on Libsyn, which hosts this podcast, but you can also find me on YouTube, Apple Podcast, of course, the Spreaker, Stitcher, all that History of Comics Podcast. History of Comics Podcast. And, of course, you can find me on Facebook page at the History of Comics Podcast. Give it a like if you feel free. And I'm on Twitter at the History of Comics Podcast. Follow me if you wish. And like I said, just having a lot of fun. And now that I've done this rambling history, which once again was the main source was the comic book by Paul Sassine, an out-of-print book. But you can still find it in Amazon and other places, so give it a check out. And once again, thanks to my dad, my stepmom Laura, my sisters Emily and Katie for buying it for me back in when I was back in high school in the 90s. It really kicked off my passion for the history behind this medium. And but give it a read if you can. And with that, we're now going to double back and do a deep dive. The next episode, we're going to be looking into the history of the guy who started the golden age for comic books, Superman. Thank you for listening. Please continue to do so if you like. And go out and enjoy yourself a good comic book.